one of the things that really, I did experiment with all kinds of different forms, at one point, but I remember going to a lecture late in my undergraduate career, so looking back about 1978 or so, which was as a guest lecturer, Geoffrey Hill came and lectured on Blake. And unforgettable lecture, he quoted a letter of Blake's when Blake was himself learning the art of engraving, and absolutely precise. Of course, there's no rubbing in and rubbing out and generally experimenting with the shades of a pencil on an expensive piece of copper. This is it. You must be decisive, bold.
No going back.
Anyway, Blake says in a letter that the most important line in any piece of art engraving is the bounding line. Now, Geoffrey Hill is a great poet and, of course, sensitive to language, said bounding was a very interesting word for Blake to use, because he could have said the boundary line or the binding line. But bounding, curiously enough, is one of those English words which has two completely opposite meanings, like cleave. You can say you cleave unto your wife, or you cleave it apart. So bounding is bounding in, bound into saucy doubts and fears. But it's also bounding about, bounding with energy, abounding with energy. Abounding, grace abounding to the chief of sinners. So what Geoffrey Hill went on to say was that in Blake's case, the energy of Blake's art and poetry is intensified and abounds all the more because he has chosen to bind it into these strict forms. And he gave the example of the most famous poem of Blake's poems, the tiger. So, if you think about how a modern poet might want to write about the tiger, they'd assume because the tiger had lots of energy and was leaping around and slinking away through the forests, that they'd have to have long lines for when it was running faster and short lines and all this. And, whereas, of course, Blake goes, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? And then there's that image of the forge, and it's as though the walls and boundaries of the form are like the walls of a furnace that intensify the fire of what's being said. And
that's true. It's, of course, the same in music. One of the interesting things to say in blues form has been with us for decades and decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
And shows no signs of waning.
And it allows supreme inventiveness.
Why do these forms persist? That's another much bigger question. But they do. Undoubtedly they just do.
And also you then have fun playing with them. So if you think about if you think of 1-4-5 progression on a blues thing, then the masters of the art have huge fun doing a series of subversions and inversions of that, or little runs of chords leading up to the chord you're waiting for,
You once said that you learnt, or you came back into poetry when you were a young man through Cohen and Dylan.
Yeah, because I was looking for this form that I'd first read in the in the kind of romantics, and I thought, well, I can't just live in the 19th century. I've got to, So I was, reading lots of contemporary poems, but not finding the music, not finding the form. Well, I found many interesting insights, and I certainly was shown the world in a new way. But on the other hand, I was listening all the time to Dylan and Leonard Cohen, and I suddenly realised if you take the sheer beautiful lyricism of a poet like Byron, Byron can write great stuff, but he also writes quite trivial stuff. But I don't know, if you think she walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, who was writing that? Nobody, except you listen to Leonard Cohen, and I believe that you heard my master sing when I was sick in bed. I suppose that he told you everything I keep locked away in my head. It's exactly the same meter, and it's perfectly.
So does this mean that you would put people like Cohen and Dylan up there with the greats?
I think I would. Not every person.
As it were, did they lead you in that direction?
No, I think in the cases of Cohen and Dylan, I would put them up there. I think the body of work is substantial enough. The poems and songs have been with us long enough.
Yeah.
They've spoken again and again into so many different scenarios and come back again and again with power. They've shown that they're not simply the birth of a moment, and to die with the moment that they were given. They're capable. They're kind of beautifully reticulated kind of nets of meaning that are capable of catching more and more experience as we take them out. Yeah.
Are there any particular poems of yours that rely on Dylan and Cohen explicitly?
There are one or two that are direct comments on them. I actually wrote, when Leonard Cohen died, I wrote a rondeau.
Have you got that
for Leonard Cohen, which was actually about Leonard Cohen as a kind of, in the line of the Jewish prophets and also in the line of David and the psalm writers. I think, his Jewish heritage and his drawing on the scriptures is very significant. So let me see if I can, here we are, a rondeau for Leonard Cohen. And this is the rondeau poetic form, which has lines of repetitions, which is, and it does depend on some of, one or two of Cohen's lyrics are echoed in it, particularly on songs of love and hate. That extraordinary song, Love Calls You By Your Name, between the stained glass and the stain, between the ocean and your open vein, once again, love calls you by your name. So, this is a rondeau for Leonard Cohen. I was really moved that this was actually read in Montreal at an event to commemorate.
In his honour.
In his honour. So, a rondeau for Leonard Cohen. Like David's psalm, you named our pain and left us, but the songs remain to search our wounds and bring us balm, till every song becomes a psalm, and your restraint is our refrain. Between the stained glass and the stain, the dark heart and the open vein, between the heart storm and the harm, like David's psalm, I see you by the window pane, alive within your own domain. The light is strong, the seas are calm. You chant again the telling charm that names, and naming heals our pain, like David's psalm.